No one online will be able to hear you unless you speak directly into this microphone. So we will have someone give you a microphone when it's your turn to speak. We have quite a few folks. I don't want to put a time limit on it. I would just like you to be conscientious of allowing everyone an opportunity to make a comment or a question, as we only have an hour and a half for this evening. So today is the second of 3 sessions. Tomorrow is the third session, which is online only. The deck and the content for all 3 sessions, we had one on December 17th, is identical, but we encourage you to join and listen and question and give comments continuously. So if we can move to the next slide. Our agenda for this evening, and you guys all have packets, so I'm going to keep going. Next slide. Great. So I want to start by sharing the overall vision for this project, because this project, we think, hits a lot of very important goals. Top amongst them is the city really wants to address a serious housing crisis. And so the city has a goal of delivering mixed income housing on this site. You'll hear from the Whitney about an expansion of their world-class cultural institution. You'll also hear a little bit from Highline via New York City Parks about their expansion of their maintenance and operation space as part of this project and expanding to year-round programming. You'll hear a little bit about the future of the Gansevoort market vendors, and then also we'll delve a little bit into the public realm component of this project. Next slide. So the history of this site, I think many of you are familiar with it, but back in 2009 is when the Highline opens to the public, and the Whitney Museum of Art and the city close a sale and sign a contract for 99 Gansevoort Street, which is the current home of the Whitney Museum. And so, fast forward, you will hear from each of the project partners sort of their contributions and success at their current site, and how they want to plan for their future. And last October is when Gansevoort Square was officially announced as a project, and we began engagement last fall. And that's today is the continuation of this engagement. Next slide, please. Here is an aerial view of the current site to orient you. Next slide. So now I'm going to delve a little bit more into what we anticipate the housing program to be. The city has a goal of providing 50% affordable housing as part of the project out of a total of 600 housing units. The project will comply with the state's 485X program. And what this program mandates is that 25% of the affordable units have to have an average 60% area median income. I'll go into in subsequent slides what that actually means and what the income numbers are and what the corresponding rents will be as well. But I want to say that 485X is a minimum. When we release the housing RFP, we are going to make it extremely clear that the goal is reaching 50%. And part of today's engagement is that we want to get some feedback on what are those the other 25%, what affordability levels you think are appropriate as a part of this project. And then I'll just mention separately that the city is committed to providing affordable housing in all neighborhoods, in all boroughs. Community Board 2, which is where this project is located, has historically not provided and there hasn't been an opportunity to provide a significant number of affordable units in Manhattan Community Board 2. Next slide, please. So this project is going to use something called a cross-subsidy model. And what does that mean? That means that this funding approach will utilize the value of the land itself and the value of the market rate units, right? So just to put a very fine point on it, 600 units of housing, 300 affordable, 300 market rate, right? And so the market rate rents that we anticipate being able to garner at a site such as this one in the West Village and in the meatpacking in Manhattan, as well as the value of the land, is what is going to get reinvested into this project to pay for the affordable units. And so the city is contributing the land for the development, and the value of the land will offset the lower rents on the affordable units. So this is what we mean when we say we're utilizing a cross-subsidy model. Next slide. So why are we using a cross-subsidy model on this location? First, HPD has an extremely oversubscribed pipeline. What does this mean? It means that even after all of the land use approvals for a typical project in the city of New York, it will take close to a decade for that project to be built. And we are hoping to have a very efficient and aggressive timeline on this project. So time and efficiency is one reason. Also, HPD is limited in the amount of subsidy it can provide each year for the entire city. And so that is part of the reason the pipeline for delivery and construction of affordable units using in the HPD model takes so long. And so the strength of this neighborhood's housing market, we feel, makes it an ideal candidate to move forward with the cross-subsidy model. Next slide. So I'm going to pause briefly on the housing. We'll go back to a little bit more to delve into the actual income bands and rents. And the project partners now will speak briefly to their portion of the project. And there will be opportunities for Q&A afterwards.
Thank you, Gigi. Hello, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to be a part of this conversation. My name is ID Arruede. I'm Deputy Director at the Whitney Museum. And I'm very excited for what this project potentially makes possible. Professionally, certainly what it makes possible for the Whitney in terms of our ability to continue to deliver on our mission and to more fully meet the needs of our audiences and our visitors. And personally, I'm excited for it as well. I've lived in this community for 18 years, currently on Jane Street, as I mentioned last time. And so much of what we'll be discussing today, I've been in the prior briefing sessions, also resonate with me personally also. But wearing my Whitney hat for a moment, I'll start there. So the Whitney will be turning 100 years old coming up in 2030. So we're about 95 years old now. In that period of time, the Whitney has been in 4 different locations across the city. The Whitney was founded down in this community on West 8th Street back in 1930. And every time the Whitney has moved in the past 95 years, we've moved because we haven't had the ability to grow in the ways that we needed in the locations that we were in. So the Whitney moved to our current building in this community. We came full circle, we like to say, back to where we started in 2015. At the time that happened, we knew for a fact, based on history, based on experience, that if we got it right and if we truly delivered on our mission for our audiences and for artists, that we would have a need to grow again at some point. So that was always a long-term vision, that we would have a need to grow. And of course, insanity is repeating the same thing over and over again and hoping for different results. So we really did hope that this would be our permanent home, and it'd be a home that we could grow into and expand in over time. Actually, we could go to the next slide, which shows some bullets. Thank you. So this really is a vision for the future in many ways. I will say when we moved downtown 10 years ago, we anticipated welcoming about 800,000 visitors a year. That was already 3 times what we were doing uptown. This year, we're on track to welcome over 1 million visitors. We've welcomed as many as 1.3, 1.4 million visitors in given years. So we are clearly at capacity in many respects, as we thought we might be. And it's 10 years on, and of course, here we are. The other thing I will say is when our new director, our CEO, Scott Rothkopf, stepped into his role a little over a year ago, last November, he really reinvigorated and sort of renewed our push to grow our audiences, to diversify our audiences, to help us serve more audiences and serve more diverse audiences and serve them better based on the ways in which we know that our communities think about museums today, which is in many ways different than it was certainly 100 years ago. Museums are much less about objects, certainly the Whitney is, and much more about people and much more about community in the context of art and art making, of course. In the next slide in a moment, you'll see what that push to grow our audiences has meant, how we're doing it, and how any physical expansion of the Museum of the Whitney in the long term will have to be done and will be done with these audiences and communities in mind. The Whitney currently serves thousands of K through 12 students every year. So outside of people who come to buy tickets and see a show, we're serving school kids across New York City, many of whom come from Title I schools, so schools where public support is needed. And we serve many of those students at no cost or low cost. But we have only one classroom and one dedicated art making space for these kids. So we're turning people away currently. And there's much more of a demand for that kind of thing from museums than even, I wouldn't say than the gallery, traditional gallery experience, but there's a growing demand for that kind of educational support. And then finally, this site for us represents truly the only viable contiguous expansion space in the neighborhood. There'd be nowhere else to go besides it. So it really is just so incredibly exciting and valuable for the Whitney to have an opportunity to grow in this space. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. So I talked about this focus on growing our audiences, diversifying audiences, serving them better, serving them more fully. Here are just a few of the exciting things that have happened in just the last year. So beginning in January of 2024, last year, we expanded and launched 2 of the most expansive free admission programs in the Whitney's history, the 2 sort of on the right side of that slide on your right. Beginning in January, the Whitney is now free every Friday night from 5 to 10 p.m. I know many of you probably know this. We're free every Friday night from 5 to 10 p.m. for everyone, regardless of where you're from. We're also now free every second Sunday of the month, and we see lots of families coming in. Now, we've seen a great audience response to these programs. I'll give you a few examples. One is we're seeing 2 to 2.5 times the normal volume of audiences on Friday nights. But even more impressively, in my opinion, is 60% of our audiences on Friday nights are people of color. That's unheard of for a contemporary art museum, unheard of. So not only are we growing audiences, but we're expanding the audiences we're serving. And newer audiences come with newer needs in terms of how they expect to engage with the museum. So that's all very exciting. And then just in December, so last month, we launched another expansion, which is that the Whitney is now free to everyone 25 and under, all day, every day, all year long. Again, wherever you're from. Just wonderful. But it really is, these are the foundations for the kinds of expansion that we are striving for and the audiences we hope to serve. So it gives in many ways the underpinnings of what an expanded physical footprint would look like. We can go to the next slide. And I have only 2 more quick slides and I'll be done. It's all about connecting art and audiences. One of the things that being downtown and being in the building we're in now really helped us address 10 years ago was this idea of, our mission is to serve artists in many ways. That's sort of the ethos on which the museum was founded. And the ways in which contemporary artists' work are increasingly more ambitious, more expansive, it's not a traditional, you think of the Whitney, and I hope many of you are familiar with our programs and exhibitions, but this is an installation view of the Whitney Biennial. It's very far from a traditional white wall row of paintings. we're working in really expansive and creative ways to meet the needs of audiences. And working in this way requires a certain sort of architecture, footprint, physicality to enable us meet the needs of the audiences we serve, especially artists in this case. We go to the last slide. And then, we talked about, looking beyond the traditional gallery experience. In our 10 years downtown, we've seen the broad audience and community demand for what we do, even outside of our gallery walls. So this is just one example of an art activation we had outside of the museum on Gansevoort Street. You can see the street there sodded, and audiences all sort of sitting and picnicking at an art installation by the artist Kara Walker. But you'll see us sort of spilling out of our wall. And in many ways, we feel that art does not and should not start within the walls of a museum. Art is all around us. But there is a certain generosity of architecture and space that enables really the unique mission of what the Whitney does and helps us do it well and in a way that's differentiated from many other communities across the city. So this just at a very high level gives a sense of why we're so excited about the possibilities and why we're looking forward to continue to be a part of these conversations with all of you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Joe Tarver. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Friends of the High Line. We're also excited about the opportunity to expand the High Line's maintenance and operations building to meet the growing demands of the park and to increase our impact on New York City. A little background on us. We're a nonprofit. We hold a license agreement with the Parks Department to maintain and operate the park. We were founded 25 years ago by members of the local community. Each year, we must raise from private sources almost 100% of the park's operating budget. This coming June, it will be 16 years since the first section of the park opened. At that time, it was estimated that we would have about 350,000 visitors a year. This past year, we had about 7 million visitors. Of course, the park is now 3 times longer than it was when the first section opened. It's about 1.5 miles long. But not surprisingly, we have a series of limitations with the current maintenance and operations building. Park has grown, but the building hasn't. If we wanted to have all our staff in on the same day, we wouldn't have enough workspace for them. I'm sure you've seen the public art that we have out on the park. We fabricate most of that in the maintenance and operations building, and we're out of space to do that. Our art program is constantly negotiating with our maintenance and repair staff for space, and we move things around. We move equipment out on the planning terrace, out on the park. Sometimes when they're fabricating the last pieces of things or preparing to move it out on the park. So, it's the same thing with our maintenance and repair staff. We're out of space for the equipment that we need to maintain a park that's 1.5 miles long. We also are unable to build up surplus stock of key parts and materials we need to repair and maintain the park because there's just not enough space in the building. We also know that there is a demand for educational programming year-round. Currently, we're only able to do programming during the warm months out on the park. And during those months, we do have thousands of people that participate in that program, mainly from the local community and across the city, families, seniors, children and youth. So we know that there is an appetite to be able to do programming year-round during all 4 seasons. And so expansion of the building would also enable us to do that as well. What exactly are we talking about in terms of expansion? We're talking about building 2 floors on top of our existing floors and then expanding north about 30 feet out into what is now the Meat Packers parking lot. So for us, expansion, as I've said, is about 2 things. One is to help better support the needs of the park. And the second is the opportunity to dream bigger and better serve New Yorkers through our programming. Thank you.
So John Joe Boggy typically covers the Gansevoort meat market. He is a, I'm going to try to cover it, but without the flair. John is a 4th generation butcher. And what he would tell you if he were able to join us today is that the building is very old. The infrastructure is very challenging for what is needed for the 7 meat packers and 1 coffee shop that exists, and that in conversations with the city, Anthony, if you go to the next slide, the Gansevoort Meat Co-op has elected to leave their site early. It was a decision that was negotiated between the co-op and the city. They are tremendously supportive of this project. It is not a surprise that there would be intentions to develop on this piece of land, and they recognize that with changes in the industry, that they are not the future of the site and are excited to be part of and support this project moving forward. Anthony, if you could continue. Jack, do you want to talk a little bit about our current negotiated site plan?
Hi, good evening. Jack Robbins, partner and director of urban design for FX Collaborative, working with the city and my colleagues and counterparts on the design side for the Whitney and the High Line. So this plan is the negotiated plan, and want to emphasize negotiated. It's the product of many months of kind of back and forth and between the various parties involved with this block, and it is a compromise plan. It's not absolutely ideal for anyone, but it works well for everyone. It includes the expansion of the maintenance and operations for the High Line. It includes expansion for the Whitney, includes an open space and a site for housing that is big enough. We've done a number of tests. Works well. It's a very efficient footprint for the housing. On the right, what you see are the building envelopes, and what I want to emphasize here is that they are envelopes. These are not buildings. These are not designs. This is not what the buildings are going to look like. These are the box that the buildings come in. Right? So the buildings can fit inside those envelopes. The buildings haven't been designed. I won't design them, right? That's not my role. They're going to be designed as part of this future RFP. But there are some key things that we want your input on, and we'll get to that a little bit later in the presentation.
Anthony, if you could continue. Okay, so we're going to progress to the more interactive portion. So there was, based on previous presentations, a request for us to really break down some of the concepts and some of the acronyms that you're hearing here. So you've heard RFP and you've heard ULURP. What is an RFP? An RFP stands for a request for proposals. What that is it is a document that will be issued from the New York City Economic Development Corporation, and it is a request for development teams to propose a housing program and a way to fund a housing program that meets the criteria that we as the city put into this RFP. It is a document we're hoping to release at the end of the month. And what we'll do afterwards is that all of these proposals will be looked at very carefully, and they will be evaluated based on their ability to meet the criteria that we outline in the document. And the goal is that we will then be able to choose the developer that best meets the requirements with the key objective of reaching 50% affordable housing. And that will be very clearly articulated in the RFP. And what the EDC team and the city team will do is they will have an opportunity to look through all of them, compare them all, and really try to leverage the best possible developer for the housing portion. Right. And then further down, so we're hoping to have a developer selected by the end of 2025. And then after that, we'll have to do environmental review on the site. And then there will have to be something called ULURP, which stands for Uniform Land Use Review Procedure. And what this is, it's part of the city charter. It is about a 7 to 9 month process where any project that requires a change in land use has to go through as part of a transparency and accountability. And if you go to the next slide, there are very, oh, I'm sorry, I went through this whole slide. Let me take a step back. So the developer RFP, like I said, they will respond. We're asking them to maximize the total number of affordable units at the lower AMI levels, right? So the respondents will compete in their ability to provide the best program. And so after that's selected, again, we'll go into ULURP, which I believe is the next slide. And this is the timeline, right? We plan to certify in 2026, and there's a set number of days that each of these entities get to weigh in and provide feedback. So Community Board 2, the Borough President, the City Planning Commission, and then ultimately it would have to pass a full City Council vote. So we laid these out and to drive home a couple of points. One, we are extremely early in the process. It was important for us to come and start engagement before we released anything. So all of this is years ahead. There were conversations about people will start constructing and next year, and that is not the case. We are at least 3-4 years from any sort of real details around this, and still nothing is in stone until the city council passes it, right? Which we think will be sometime in 2027, right? So I want to be clear that throughout that process, you will get tired of hearing from us, and that we will be coming to you consistently time and time again as we reach each milestone and as we further understand what your concerns, what your needs are, and we're going to be fully transparent about how that process works. So if you continue. I do also want to say that as part of this project, we structured it purposefully so that each project component, meaning the affordable housing part, the expansion of the Whitney, the expansion of the Highline space, can proceed independently, because the Whitney and the Highline have to raise their own capital funds for their expansion. The city is not subsidizing in any way the Whitney and Highline expansion. I just want to make that also very clear. But nothing can proceed until, again, there's the full ULURP vote. and all the components of the project will be filed under one single ULURP application. But what the city is hoping is that we can start on delivering the affordable housing piece very quickly after ULURP certification, because that is, again, going back to utilizing a cross-subsidy model. One of the advantages of using the cross-subsidy model is that we don't have to wait 10 years, 8 years, like typical HPD projects have to wait. And so, again, this is the second session. We'll have another virtual session only tomorrow. We'll cover the same topics. Next slide, please. All right, now we get into the part of public input. Next slide. Okay, so now we're going to get into the details of affordability. So what you see on the chart here, when we talk about area median income, is what HPD describes as what is considered extremely low income, what is considered very low, low, moderate, and middle. And so the numbers are the AMI, what we call the bands, right? And so when we talk about a median household income for New York City, the average median income you'll see here is a little bit over $79,000. The average income for the West Village is a little bit over $153,000, just as a comparison. And so these are also based on household size. So on this left-hand side, you'll see the AMIs. On the top, you'll see family size. So if we're talking about 25% at an average 60% AMI, 60% AMI, these are the incomes based on family size that a family would make in order to qualify to apply for the affordable units in this building, right? So next slide. And then these are their monthly rents that, based on their income level, that they would pay to live there. And again, this goes back to subsidizing, right? You're not only subsidizing the construction of the building, but there is a continual subsidy every month based on a lower rent that is below market rate for affordable housing. Next slide. So the proposal will be required to provide a mix of AMI bands. And so for 485X, it's an average of 60%, right? So now we're going to do some basic math. You could break the 25% down into 3 categories and go even lower and go very low at the 40% AMI, but then you would have to balance it out with a third at 80, right? So that your average is 60, if that makes sense, right? And then I think what we would like to get feedback from you all today is also with a goal of 50% affordability, there's still 25% that we're interested to hear from you as to what you think those income bands should be, right? So one could argue, for example, that given the higher income in this neighborhood and wanting families that live here to be able to apply and live in the building, we may want to go a little bit higher. Some folks could say, I don't agree with that. I think that given the city's average income being around 70-ish thousand, we should try to maximize, you know, at 60 or 80%, and that should represent the other 25%, right? Understanding that with a cross-subsidy model, if you are able to bring in some of the higher AMI bands, which means ability to pay more rent monthly over time, that may allow for deeper affordability and more affordability as part of the overall funding equation. so I think that is one of the questions that we want you to think about and to share with us. And here they are down here. What AMI bands does the community want to see as part of Gansevoort Square? And is your priority deeper affordability, i.e. lower AMI bands, or maximizing the total number of units that are below market rate? Because there's a trade-off. You can't have it both ways. No, please.
It's because we're using the money without being able to.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry. They can't hear you. They can't hear you.
So without being in your face about it, when we talk, at least from the Zoom that I attended a couple weeks ago, when we talk about a 60 or unit building, a lot of that, of course, is going to be very high end. And we are told it's to provide the financing to do this model. Now, I feel we need a hell of a lot more affordable housing to support those of us who live very high end. And I'm getting old. I need someone who's a caregiver, and it'd be nice if they didn't live 4,000 miles away. So I raise the question as when you say it is a trade-off, I reject that as a policy statement, not because your model is flawed, but as a matter of policy, given the amount of acreage that's there. And it's not that I don't want the Whitney to succeed. And I'm one of the people who scratched and saved $5,000 to make the Highland happen 20 years ago. And that was a lot of money for me then. I want them all to succeed. But when I look at urban planning, from a planning point of view, this plan doesn't fully make sense to me as a longtime resident of the village. And I have greatly benefited from the village being as wealthy as it is. So I just want to challenge why it's that kind of trade-off. I would like to see a lot more affordable housing in all the bands.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for your comment. And I want to acknowledge that that is a comment that we've heard in previous sessions. And, and, I think the answer is that, yes, the city would love to build significant number of affordable units everywhere throughout the city, right? I think I talked a little bit about the challenges of it being built through HPD, and that's why the city is really looking to this cross subsidy model. This cross subsidy model really only works in areas that we can leverage the real estate market, which primarily would be Manhattan below 96, maybe other sort of downtown kind of high value properties in real estate. And I think the complexity of this project is such that we are really looking to deliver affordable housing in a neighborhood that traditionally hasn't been able to deliver affordable housing. And we are hoping to deliver it with a band of incomes, right? Not just for extremely low or low. We want this to be a well thought out sort of plan overall. I don't know if the real estate team or Jack, if you guys want to add anything. Well, the goal is 50%. We are very committed to reaching 50%.
Gifted this market rate.
I mean, I think EDC could speak to this just as well as I can, but to the best of my knowledge, and I'm certain of this, the Whitney's paying fair market value for the land with no public subsidy, which is similar to what we did for the site that we have right now. So we're paying fair market value for the land. also considering its use as an art museum.
And the maintenance and operations building is owned by the Parks Department. And so it does sit on city land. Yep. But we would be raising the money privately for the expansion.
So I just want to apologize that there are two microphones, but the other one is not working well. So we're just going to have to pass this microphone back and forth. So I see a couple hands. We're going to go across the room this way. If you could just be patient, we'll do in-room questions first, and then we'll go to the Zoom.
Hi, I'm Steve Godicke. I lived in the neighborhood for 30 years. I love the Whitney and I love the High Line. Could you please explain why they were the partners that were given this incredibly valuable public resource, first of all, and how the mix of affordable housing versus the other uses on that site has been determined?
You want me to start? Sure. He's like, no, she's going to answer it. Yes. So when the Whitney chose to move downtown in 2009, as part of their purchase agreement with the city, a right of first offer was negotiated with the Whitney understanding that they may want to expand on this site in the future. So that is the answer to the first part of your question. A pre-existing agreement. Correct. It's a pre-existing legal agreement. Secondly, I think the question was, just so I understand, how did we come to the negotiated site plan? The negotiated site plan was a 8 to 10 month negotiation process between all of the project partners to really think about how we can, as a city and as cultural institutions, really try to maximize use and also economic development on this site, right? The city is facing a generational housing crisis. We are prioritizing building affordable housing throughout the city. It is a city-owned site. I think, the Whitney sort of addressed why they need a footprint, what their vision is for expansion, and I think the High Line did something similar. So it was really about trying to find a layout and a plan that was able to meet multiple goals.
Yeah, I think for me, I have a lot of questions about what low-income housing is. When I looked it up on the internet today, I saw that the gallery assistants, the security officers, and security guards at the Whitney are in the lowest category, which is under $45,000, as are the Highline workers that work on there. So there are a lot of people that are part of these organizations that would benefit from living in this community and contributing to this community by having their children go to school in a neighborhood near where they work. And there's many workers who are healthcare workers, workers at restaurants who are coming from really far away. And we need to provide housing for everyone. So I don't think we should really be considering raising the margin. And I'm not sure why it's so set in stone that we have to be appeasing this, model that you've come up with, because we really need to think about how culturally we as a city go forward with extreme differences in wealth. And that has happened in this neighborhood where so many people have come in and taken over, lots of buildings or multiple houses in the neighborhood. And then that's created a real crunch, and it's affecting all levels of culture in this neighborhood. And I would like us to be more involved. Having something on December 17th is technically in the fall. but it's really cutting it close. And this is right after Christmas. So like meetings that are planned that are very inaccessible for us to get people in the community to come, I think it's not helpful. And I would appreciate it in the future when you're thinking of having meetings, think of places that are not on the, like elderly people are not going to want to walk out here in January. Okay. So like, let's think about having meetings in places that are accessible, times that are accessible, well-publicized meetings, and really think of the community as a partner in this project.
Thank you.
I'd like to say, first of all, that this is not a community that has traditionally had trouble providing affordable housing. It became Greenwich Village because it was affordable housing, full stop. And it's very recent that it's become a luxury area. And this lady was talking about buildings being taken over. These are tenements and low-rise apartment buildings that have now become mansions. So that's what's happened. And it's happened mostly in the last 10 years. I mean, it had become middle class in this neighborhood, but it had not become luxury living. There were factories here. There were warehouses. The last factory, the Babaco Alarm Company in our immediate neighborhood, was converted to housing in the 2000s. So that statement just should not be made. We traditionally provide low-income housing. And I live in Westbeth, which is rent stabilized. But, you know, there were a lot of rent stabilized apartments and even rent control ones. So that's just to one side. If the EDC, and I question why the EDC is in charge of this at all, frankly, no offense to you. If the EDC built a modest building that was not geared to high-end renters and purchasers, it could be all affordable. And it would not have to be immensely tall. Nothing should be taller than the Whitney. The Whitney is already taller than anything that was ever there before. So
Hi, my name is Tom. First of all, I want to say I love the Whitney and I love the High Line. And I understand why you guys need more space and I support you and you've contributed to the community immensely. The High Line alone, you came in and revitalized an area respecting the character and the people of the community. It's the third of the triumvirate that I questioned. Now, I understand that you're doing the subsidy rates and all that to fund this, but it feels like giving a private developer public land for free to develop luxury housing and some affordable stuff. That's the housing that is wildly out of proportion to the meatpacking area. It just seems weird to me. And I have a couple questions. One, how can there be any market rate housing on a publicly owned site? And two, who stands to make a profit out of this? Because this can't be done out of the goodness of your heart. Someone is making money. And I have the feeling it's the developer. Now, my third question, sorry, because in the last meeting, which I was out of town for and didn't know about and had to watch on the YouTube, these fine gentlemen spoke and then there were some questions. But the last meeting, Joe here, he mentioned the Hudson Yards. And he said that the Western Rail Yards was a disaster. There was a 2009 plan that went through extensive review by the local community, and the High Line was involved in that review. And then they threw it out and came up with something that is a disaster. How do we know that's not going to happen here? Our mayor's under investigation for his dealings with the Department of Buildings. Like, how do we trust? Okay, sorry, I'm angry. Who's going to make a profit? How can you sell market rate apartments? And how can we guarantee that we're not going to get screwed over like Hudson Yards? And by the way, I love leading with the Whitney and the Highline, it's like the woman with the puppy. I feel bad even saying this, but I think there's something really wrong going on here. That you're asking us about our decision. You want our input about which size low income. It's a 600-foot tower of ugliness. That's what we want to talk about. We don't. Anybody who can't afford it is welcome. It's the tower, and you're not dealing with that.
Thank you. So the height, the 600 feet is, you know, the context to the neighborhood is a criticism that we are very aware of and have heard raised. This is our third public session, so it is something that we are aware of, and this is part of the conversation, right? I think what I will say of going through sort of all the milestones moving forward and all of the review that has to happen, those are the ways that we memorialize and really put pen to paper as to what this city will be delivering as for this project as a whole. We're at the very beginning. And, you know, we thank you for your comments, and we're going to continue, you know, taking notes and making sure that we capture this as we go back to the team and to the city to discuss what the community's concerns are. But certainly height and context is at the forefront, and we hear that. Yeah. Did someone from real estate want to answer?
Yeah. Profits.
Okay, hi, I'm Sunith Almaraj. I'm the real estate department at EDC. And so to your question about who profits, so the site will be RFP'd to a private developer. And there's a process that we go through in vetting the proposals. So there has to be a level that it makes it worthwhile for a developer to develop the site. At the same time, we need to maximize the affordability. So it's a balancing act to work out, maximize affordability. At the same time, the developer needs to have enough funds to build the project, to be able to sell it, to be able to then eventually maintain the building. So there's a whole process that's involved in determining the financial feasibility of the project. So we're not looking, you know, proposals that just maximize profit are not going to be the ones that are at the top of our list. So we're looking really at maximizing affordability, and we have to see what the market bears with that respect. So. And sorry, you had another question? Right. So as Gigi had, you know, previewed and then talked about that the city has a limited pot, HPD, Housing Preservation Development, as a limited pot of funds of subsidy. And that subsidy will be used across the entire city. And the markets, real estate markets and neighborhoods that do not have rents high enough to be able to cross-subsidize the affordable units. Those are the markets that need, and the neighborhoods that need public subsidy the most. So we're trying to maximize the number of affordable units across the entire city. And in markets where there are rents that are strong enough to be able to subsidize the affordable units, such as Gansevoort market right now, is where you know, we'll use the cross-subsidy model. So it really has to do with figuring out, with these limited resources, how do we create the most affordable units across the entire city, looking at all neighborhoods. Yeah. So when you say a disaster, meaning, can you?
the related proposal at the Western Rail Yards.
So okay, so we're at the very, very beginning of the process now. Well, so there's the flip side. What are we going to commit to, right? We're going to commit to maximizing affordability. We're going to commit to getting feedback and input from the community on the levels of AMIs. We're engaging with the community to get feedback of what types of housing that you want for this project. So we can commit to what we can provide, what we're going to provide. So. Yeah.
Thank you, Sunita. We're just gonna move on because we have a lot of hands up, and I'm just gonna finish the back row and then we'll.
About what you can commit to, why are you not committing to structures that fit within the larger community itself? You know, the meatpacking district is landmarked, and there's a historic district within that. And having a building 600 feet high throws off the entire scale of the neighborhood.
Yeah, I think I just want to reiterate that I've lived in the village for over 25 years, and the height of this building is just totally unacceptable. So I think we all want affordable housing, but this is so out of scale with the current area that we're all horrified that you would even propose this.
I'm Lori Krasny Brown. We live at 312 West 11th Street, and I'm excited about adding to the Whitney, and I'm fine with the High Line needing more space. But as you've already heard, it's the residential tower that I have 3 very worrisome concerns. The height of the building is so out of context with its neighbor buildings and the neighborhood. And it sets a dangerous precedent. When you build a building of that height, then another developer might say, well, you see, we have a building of that height. We could certainly use another one nearby. And before you know it, the very distinctiveness of this neighborhood is diminished, and we might as well be anywhere. And the reason I know you've given, we were at the December meeting as well, was and still is that the city, if I understand you correctly, the city already has ongoing commitments to subsidize affordable housing that put it schedule back 5 to 8 years. And why should we wait when we have another way of accomplishing some of this? Honestly, I find that a very poor excuse. If the city of New York is serious and sincere about the crisis of the city not having enough affordable housing, why does the city accept the limits that you have described, that there's only this pot of in the budget to subsidize affordable housing? Why not increase that limit? And why limit the number of projects every year? I just heard you say that. I didn't remember hearing that before. Why not increase? Why should the city be so ready to delegate this responsibility to provide affordable housing to private equity? Why not build a stunning, energy efficient, fully affordable housing building that in fact sets a model for other projects around the city?
Thank you. And thank you for coming again.
No, I didn't.
Hi, thank you. My name is Dina Tasswinter, and I'm here to speak on behalf of Village Preservation. But I also wanted to briefly state that I grew up in West Village houses right here in the neighborhood, which was a really important affordable housing initiative and just speaks also to the long history of affordability that we have had historically here. But I have a written statement, but I promise it'll be quick. It's outrageous for the city to put forward a proposal of such enormous consequence and say that they're issuing an RFP within 1 month with the holidays in between. That's not public consultation, that's public steamrolling. But the rushed timeframe is only the tip of the iceberg of the problems with this plan, as we've all been discussing. Chief among them is the egregiously oversized 600-foot tall tower, at least double the height of any neighborhood building, inflated by the equally egregious inclusion of up to 450 units of super luxury housing. There's no excuse for using public land to build what will likely be part-time homes for the super rich. If the housing were limited here to the affordable units, the tower would be between 1/4 and half the proposed height, much more in context with its surroundings, where the Standard Hotel is far and away the tallest building at 265 feet. The city claims that because this site can generate high value, they must rely on luxury housing to pay for affordability. What that completely ignores is that unlike other sites, this is public land with no acquisition cost, and there will be other subsidies for the affordable housing. Hundreds of luxury units is a completely unacceptable use of public land. And the city must also guarantee that the affordable housing remains permanently affordable without any exception, which is not currently on the table. The city also claims that it would have to move slowly if it were to build 100% affordable housing here if there were no luxury housing to fund it. But paradoxically, just blocks away at 388 Hudson Street, the city says they can move swiftly to build 100% affordable housing at that HPD site with a new rec center as well. Both of these things cannot be true. The city also just secured $4 billion additional dollars for affordable housing as part of the City of Yes deal. What better to spend a tiny fraction of that money on than here? Finally, the city says we have to accept a ludicrously oversized tower here filled mostly with super luxury housing in order to get some affordable housing. The below market rate income restricted housing will offer some public benefit, but we should be very clear about just how, quote, affordable that will even be. Per our discussions about AMI, the required 60% of AMI is only slightly lower than the median income for New York City residents, meaning nearly half of city residents are too poor to qualify. And I think that holds, kind of regardless of how we break it down for the most part. So we demand that the city slow down this process, rethink the plan, reduce the height, and remove all luxury housing from Gansevoort Square. Thank you very much.
There are a lot of hands. Yes, I'm sorry. There's a lot of hands raised online, so I'm just going to take a couple of the folks online and then come back to the classroom.
So the first question we have online is from Asher Lasday. I will unmute you now. Asher, if you're online, you should be able to unmute. There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, sorry, I'm traveling, so I can't have my camera on. But I just want to say that I'm like massively supportive of this project. I thought the last speaker, I mean, in general, it's been really interesting to hear everyone's opinion, and I, as always, like really appreciate the community showing how much they care about.
Asher, can you do us a favor? Can you speak up a little bit, please?
Yeah, as always, I am incredibly supportive of the community, like talking about how much they care about the community and like giving their thoughts. I'll just say, I thought the last speaker asked a really interesting question. What better to spend City of Yes housing on, funding on? And I think we have an answer, right? Like it's better to spend that money on housing in places where market rate rents are not going to be able to subsidize it. Overall, if we want to maximize the number of affordable units in the city as a whole, not just in Greenwich Village, not just in the meatpacking district, this is like, I think, pretty clearly the way forward. Again, I recognize we all have different priorities. I also just want to say that I think if we're being frank, obviously it would be awesome if Greenwich Village looks like the way Greenwich Village looks like now for the rest of time. But if we have to think about prioritizing aesthetics over, you know, lowering the cost of rent for at the very least 400, if not more people, just by the nature of supply and demand. For me, the answer is clear. Aesthetics are fantastic. Architecture is important, but affordability and making New York City a place where more people can afford to live here is incredibly important. I'm very, very supportive of this project, and I just want to, you know, express that fact. And also, I know that many others are, and they're not able to. Thank you.
Asher, do you mind letting us know who you are and
Yeah,
where you live?
absolutely. Yeah, so I live on the Upper West Side. I'm a student in the Village. I grew up in New York. I was international.
Thank you. Go to another. The next question we have online is from Joanne Castillo. Joanne, you should be unmuted. Unfortunately, we can't hear you, so we'll move on to the next question. The next question is from Zach.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello,
Yes.
can Great. Yeah, my name is Zach Weinstein. I'm with Save Gansevoort. I live at Horatio and Washington Streets, a block away from the proposed project. Got two questions. First of all, Ms. Lee, you got back to, I appreciate your responding to an earlier question that I had, and you emailed me that the requirements, minimum size requirements for the subsidized apartments are contained in the HPD design guidelines for multifamily new construction and senior housing. So my first question was, do all of the guidelines in that document apply to this proposed project? Or is it just the size, minimum size requirements? Then the second question I have, and I have to say I am just sort of stunned by this. I've been trying to figure it out and I'm having a lot of difficulty. Why is it that the key decisions in this proposal have been apparently made with no community involvement whatsoever? And by key decisions, I mean the two decisions which are and will be responsible for shaping the configuration and design of the entire project. And those decisions are the site plan, for one, and the decision to use the cross-subsidy model for the affordable housing subsidies, number two. Given the site plan and the construction of all the housing in one small parcel in the northwest corner of the site, and given the decision that all the affordable housing must be subsidized exclusively by luxury market rate housing in the same building, we are locked into what is essentially an unacceptable plan for the community. And yet this decision, again, and please correct me if I'm wrong, these key decisions are now have been made. They are locked in stone once the request for proposals goes out. And there was no involvement by Community Board 2. I would like to know if there was any involvement by our local elected officials. So far as I know, there wasn't. And there was certainly no community outreach as you're doing now after the decisions apparently have been made. So again, thank you very much. And I'd appreciate a response to those two questions.
So I can address the real estate questions. So in terms of why the cross-subsidy model, we can reiterate what we had, previously discussed, is that the funds that are available to subsidize affordable housing are limited. There are tax-exempt bonds that are federal funds that are distributed nationally, and there's a cap on that. So it's not as if we can just go out and we'd like to ask for more. It is a limited resource. And this limited resource needs to be used in areas where we don't have the market rents to support the affordable units. So So that is why we're using the cross-subsidy model to unlock more affordable housing than we otherwise would be able to had we just depended upon public subsidy. So this is creating affordable housing that's incrementally more had we just relied on subsidy, and also unlocking units, affordable units sooner than later. So there's like this 8 to 10 year pipeline. And so this allows us to move sooner than later to be able to provide affordable units for the community. I think your first question was about the guidelines from HPD for the affordable units. And to your question, yes, they will be followed in terms of HPD has guidelines in the size of the units, the number of units, to a certain extent, the unit mix. HPD requires that the affordable units be distributed evenly throughout the building. So yes, there will be, it will follow HPD guidelines with that respect. I think what was the
I think the final question was engagement. So this is a proposal. We are here taking your questions, taking feedback. Nothing is set in stone, as I said before, until a vote passes through City Council in ULURP, right? So I want to stress we are at the very, very early stages. We started off with engagement with a community board 2 meeting. The elected officials are certainly aware of the concerns, and we are in communication with them quite regularly, as I know many of you all are as well. So I want to stress again, very, very early in the process, when I talked about ULURP before, 2026, 2027. So to say that this project is set in stone and that all the decisions have been made is not true.
Another question from online. We have David Garber.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is David Garber, and I'm a resident of Greenwich Village. I attended your last meeting virtually and was able to see your presentation and hear everyone's questions and answers. Very informative. Thank you very much. What an exciting project. In general, count me as an enthusiastic supporter of what you all are proposing. That said, something that was not addressed, except in one question at the very end, was the site's interaction with 10th Avenue and the West Side Highway crossings to Hudson River Park. With Gansevoort Beach and Little Island right there, this is one of the most visited sites along the Hudson, and yet it appears as an afterthought in your presentation and plans. I recognize that there's a vision plan in place with the Meatpacking Business Improvement District, but it's important for me, and I know others in the community, that this be addressed during this project, as this is the central area that is being redeveloped in the Meatpacking District. Serious consideration should be given to closing regular vehicle access to 10th Avenue between 14th Street and Horatio Street, and creating generous pedestrian crossings to the Hudson River Park on both Gansevoort Street and Little West 12th Street. The combination of adjacent roadways of 10th Ave and the West Side Highway creates a sea of asphalt on what should be one of the grand entries to the city and its river. Options include closing 10th Avenue completely, allowing public green space and landscaping to extend all the way to the West Side Highway, which is already a corridor that vehicles can use. Redesignate 10th Avenue as a WNRF, rebuilding it for slower speeds and event closures and a more fluid mix of pedestrian and vehicle space. I recognize that addressing the adjacent streets adds another to-do list for the project, but now is the time to do it right, not just the time to do it easiest. Again, thank you so much for making progress on this initiative. I love the height of the residential. I'm excited for this site to be more fully utilized. Please don't bow to the NIMBY pressure when this is one of the most spectacular lots in the entire city and deserves a spectacular beacon. Bringing height and contemporary design to areas outside of historic districts like this is one of the best ways to continue preserving existing protected historic districts. But we'd be missing a major opportunity to soften the west edge of the site by minimizing roadways and creating connections if we don't do all of this right now. Thank you very much.
We'll now go to Frederica.
Hi.
We can hear
Can
you.
you hear me? Yes. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Two quick questions. When are the responses to the RFPs due? And if you're hearing pushback on a 60-story building, isn't the answer for the Whitney to allocate more of the site square footage to the building in order to lower it, the height of it, and also maintain the number of units? Thank you.
So the RFP is not out yet, so we don't have a due date, but I think the way to answer that is typically, once an RFP is issued, developers get 3 months to respond, and then after those 3 months will be the evaluation process that EDC goes through. So that was your first question. And I think the second question is that, as part of the site planning consideration and thinking about shadows and sunlight and air, there are efficiencies to having a single, slightly more slender building as opposed to an alternative, let's say, that could be two adjacent buildings that create a bigger, like a wider swath, right? Which then has a more prolonged shadow impact. So I think that will, when we do environmental review and all of that leading up to ULURP, I think those are concerns that we will address and we'll talk about in terms of the housing floor plate. To David's question before, at the last session, we did spend a considerable amount of time talking about housing, and there is a public realm portion of this presentation. I know we're scheduled to finish at 8. I just want to go through very quickly the other remaining issues that we wanted to get input on, and then I will just give you the remainder of the time for those of you who still had your hands up. So public realm is something that we are looking into and taking very seriously, particularly along the 10th Avenue corridor. We know that this little divot, for those of you who are familiar, which is now essentially just used for parking, loading, unloading, delivery, thinking about how to connect to the north and the south through sidewalks, and thinking about increasing pedestrian space, how the pedestrian spaces are interconnected. We have done outreach to the meatpacking bid as well as Hudson River Park Trust. We are aware of their concerns with the project. So that is something that we are continuing to due diligence. Anthony, if you just want to keep going. So some of the questions and things we want to think about are how to activate Little West 12th Street. There will be ground floor use. Is it community use? Is it retail use? What kind of retail? Those are things we're also looking for feedback on. And then again, how can we use Little West 12th Street as a connector or gateway to the larger neighborhood and to some of the destinations that are on the other side of the highway? Continuing, additional questions, activation on 10th Avenue, and then really how it can public realm and design, right? What elements of the surrounding context should the building take architectural cues from? Just going to keep going. Keep going. Right. And then also, when it comes to residential design, we are also thinking about sustainability and resiliency measures. Among some of them, things like solar panels, green roofs, and sort of anything else in addition. So I think that rounds out sort of all the topics that we wanted to get continued input on. Some of you have already been emailing, but this is the email for questions. I see every single email. And then EDC has a landing page where all of the decks that you have in front of you, the recordings, everything is posted on this landing page. So those are kind of the areas of input that we want. I think you guys all have your priorities, so I'm just going to finish with this row and then come back around. I know you've been waiting so patiently, so thank you.
Hi, Trevor Stewart. I've lived in the neighborhood for about 40 years. I have to say I'm highly skeptical of this thing being sold under the umbrella of affordable housing. I mean, affordable housing is something you can't be against. It's a desperate need. But, you know, you're asking us to believe that you're going to have a 60-story building in possibly the best site in the whole of Manhattan. Wonderful views over the Hudson River, right over the park, great views over the city. This is all about making a lot of money for some developer, and you can't sell that. It's being sold under, you know, providing affordable housing is my very cynical view, but I think that's kind of what's really going on here.
Hi, my name is George Kaminsky, and I'm a 42-year resident of West Beth. Many of my comments echo what many other people say, but there are 2 points I'd like to bring up that haven't been brought up. I know it is argued it is not physically possible to build only affordable housing on this site, but I question that statement. Please remember that many years ago, people said we couldn't have a viable Hudson River Park without building luxury housing on part of the park. But now we have a beautiful park with no luxury housing. 20 years ago, the city recommended that the High Line be demolished to spur development in West Chelsea. Great minds and community activists made it one of the gems of the neighborhood, and development boomed. West Beth is a living example of public-private financing that produced 384 units of affordable housing. So I urge you to issue an RFP that says it has to be 100% affordable housing and see what you get. There may be activists and nonprofits that will do it. The other fear that I have is directly across the street from this site is a state-owned site that now has a parking lot on it. And if we build a 60-story tower right across the street, we will have another 60-story tower across the street in another 10 years. This site should be an abundance of affordability rather than another oasis of affluence that we have seen built all over our neighborhood for the last quarter century. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jan Leslie Harding. I also have lived here for 25 something years. The thing that I don't understand is that when people mention the height of the building, you say that you've heard that and you've heard that and you're addressing it, and still the RFP is the same. You haven't been addressing it. It hasn't changed. And so when you send out the specs, the provisions that the developers are to use within all this, the affordable housing, this and that, and included is you can build up to a 600 tower. What do you think you're going to get? You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense. And the math of saying we're building this many units, 50%, which will be luxury, 50% will be median income, and then 25% will be affordable. You're not talking 25% of the entire amount of apartments. You're talking 25% of the 50%. So could we just have numbers, or, I mean, within reason? And if you did, like George said, if you did put the specs down to like, you can't build above this certain amount, then see what you get. You know what I mean? If you say you can build up to 600, every proposal you get is gonna go, yeah, cheaper for us to do this. So that's just thoughts on the map.
Happy 20th, but it's happy 25. We know that the Gansevoort market is going to stay alive, right?
No.
Okay. So I'm the proud owner of 51 Little West 12th Street. My name is Novak Nere. I had a 40-year vision. I waited 40 years in belief, vision, hindsight that the meatpacking would become an international destination when it was nothing but the boondocks and people living on Pier 54, homeless people, drug addicts, etc. Only to realize in 2025, my property, which has clear view to the Hudson River, Our Lady of Liberty, is going to be blocked by this humongous monolithic building. I was almost killed in 2021. No, it's not a joke. On my property, the sun shines down on an angle, and I create rainbows that are from the ground over to the High Line. Did anybody here walk under the rainbow or walk down Little West 12th Street? People know about me. This gentleman over here from the Whitney Museum, he saw my exhibit in the Whitney during the biennial. I did the grand opening of the Whitney. I brought the newcomers and the tourists up to the terraces. I said, there's the Empire State Building. There's the Hudson River. There's the Standard Hotel blocking the whole view. And then right down that little nook and cranny, it's called Arrow Keyboard Land. I was in a movie here. I shot fire out of the keyboard in the movie here and the hallucination scene. That's who I am. My hit was called Express Sweaty Heart by the Soul Survivors. I'm pretty sure people danced to my hit. Then I was on Atlantic Records, produced by Herbie Band. That's when I decided to get the property. And the property was demolished by the Standard Hotel that wanted to buy me out. And I didn't want to sell it because it's M15, eating, drinking, dancing, cabaret, with no restriction on live entertainment. I made it to my oath that I would never make it into a topless, bottomless pit. You know what I mean? The club, the 21 Club, etc. And they approached me. I said, I have to keep my keyboard sacred and my land sacred. But I could have had a topless, bottomless pit. Okay? So I didn't do that. And I didn't sell it to Highline, to the Standard Hotel. They pounded the ground, creating cracks in my building. They hit the Hudson Water underground stream, flooded my building out. I called the Department of Buildings. They gave me the violations, $300,000 worth. 10 years at 10%, almost $1 million that I paid for these violations, for the demolition for the HPD. I'm sorry if I'm boring you, but I just had to get it out. So now my building was demolished. I'm standing there saying to the powers above, give me a sign. A rainbow was sent to me because I took my keyboard and I put it in the center of a heart. It's shaped like an arrow, shot water out of it, a rainbow appeared. And that was my sign that don't give up in 2015. And that's when I was at the Whitney. So from 2015 to now, I just got a loan as the beach opened up last year to develop my property, a multi-million-dollar loan. I hired architects, engineers, and everything, went through the environmental process. On New Year's Eve, I found the Astor's door to Pier 54, underground, which I knew was there since 1987. My property's M15, eating, drinking establishment. Now, after spending all this money on New Year's Eve and Christmas to find all these beautiful things, I'm stymied. I'm beside myself that my terraces that are facing the Hudson will be worth nothing because they're going to be looking at a big skyscraper, and I won't be able to pay my construction, my mortgage, or my taxes. Happy 2005. Please help me to stay alive.
Hi, I'm Ted. I also live in the village, and I'm a little nervous to talk into this microphone. I guess I was wondering, the height of this building is obviously totally out of touch with the neighborhood. I was wondering if the Whitney has to pay for the land out of their own pockets and raise their own money to pay for this. I wondered, why aren't they getting all of the money that you must be making? Somebody must be making money on this. I guess I think you could probably rent these apartments for a lot because they wouldn't have the view of the only ugly building in the village because you'd be in it. So I know you could rent it for a lot. And I just wonder where that money's going and why the Whitney and the Highline are so excited to build this skyscraper first before building their expansion, and they still have to raise their own money and pay their own money for their expansion, which will happen after that, as far as I understood. And I guess I didn't understand the economics and the incentives of that and why they're so aligned with the developers here.
I'm just gonna go back there and then we'll close out with you, sir. Thank you.
Hi, Josh Spodek. I've lived on Greenwich Avenue for a little over 25 years. I came here because I heard that there was going to be a tall building, and I was confused because in this presentation, there was nothing in it about a tall building. Then when people brought it up, you said, we heard about that, but it's not in here. Why is it not on the front page? It seems to me deceptive of saying one thing and doing another. Now, people need to live in places. There's other things that we need as well. Green space would be nice. And for a second, I thought, well, there's a lot of parks around here, Hudson River Park and the Highline. But I'm looking at this picture and it's mostly pavement. We could use, and actually more deception. The trees are added in here to make it look more green than it actually is. I mean, I don't know if people are looking at this near the last page where it says public realm. I actually think it would be a good idea to put these trees in the middle of the highway because there'd be more green space. But I mean, one thing we could consider is just having a park there, an actual like green space park. Also, for you to say nothing is set in stone until some future point, what would it take for it not to happen? Is there any threshold by which someone might say, the community doesn't like this, is a bad idea, we don't like this, we're not going to do it? Because if you just say it's going to be set in stone at some future point, we're trying to stop that. So, I mean, the biggest thing here is this presentation does not seem honest. It doesn't seem credible. It seems deceptive. I mean, you're faking the trees in this picture to make it look more green than it is. We could use more green. And put on the front page, we're building a super tall building. It's not in here at all.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah, it's a quick one. Mark Brown, 312 West 11th Street. I live in the village because I love the character, the spirit, and the history here. I'm really upset about the scale of this building. I was at the last meeting and there was an architect here. And if nothing is set in stone and everything is fluid here in this project, is there an architect in place for this project? Why was there an architect here last time?
Are we talking about you?
No, there was someone else.
Yeah, I think you were the only architect on the project team. So no, the housing developer RFP, again, which has not yet been released, will give us a better indication, again, of the things that Sunitha mentioned before. Cost of construction, cost of managing the building and maintaining the affordable units. The developer team, once one is chosen, will then select an architecture firm to design the building, right? So there is no designer. The building has not yet been designed. I just want to be very clear about that. Sure, because you have a puppy.
That's the only way.
No.
Then I brought him. No, so after listening to everybody, what do we have to do to make sure that you put out an RFP that asks for 100% affordable housing, something that is in scale that makes sense for this neighborhood, that all of us in this room and probably anybody you ask that lives here wants? What do we have to do to get that RFP? Because it sounds like you're just going to put up an RFP for this project.
Thank you for that question and a very appropriate closing comment. I would say, one, reach out to your elected officials, let them know that you came to this session, you listened, this is your feedback, this is what you'd like to see. You can certainly continue. There's one more engagement session tomorrow. We are taking copious notes and making sure that we are relaying this feedback to all the powers that be within government that are, moving this plan forward. And so I think it's just making your voice known. Certainly the community board has weighed in with a resolution. They will continue to do so. And so I think it really is about, continued concerted outreach and organizing. So we are we're figuring out the best way to do that. We are pulling together a Q&A or frequently asked questions that we'll put on the website. And so we're just trying to figure out really how to capture sort of questions that have to do with the program versus concerns about the project proposal. So the answer is yes, we're just trying to figure out the best way to do that.
Just one, if you just did receive the community board too, did you say
They haven't posted their final resolution. It was discussed at their December full board meeting. We saw a draft of it. Their final resolution, as far as I know, I could be wrong because I haven't checked it yet today. Their final resolution has not yet been posted, but it's certainly, we are in communication with the with leadership at CB2, and so their concerns are top of mind for us as well. Great. Thank you for being a great participating group. And thank you for those of you who have come for the second time. We'll have this online version only tomorrow. And we'll be around if you have any additional questions. Thank you. Anthony, can you end the recording?
10 weeks. Yeah, baby.